Well, my name is DJ Ennis. I'm the program manager for the Mining Act Reclamation Program, here to talk about hard rock mine permitting in New Mexico. The Mining Act Reclamation Program is focused on reclamation after the operation is concluded. And it was passed in 1993, so it's a relatively new state law, got about 25 years of experience under this the Mining Act. And one of the things that the Mining Act is tasked with is to coordinate and collaborate with other state agencies. And those include some of our federal partners as well, if the mine is on federal land, like the BLM or Forest Service. But mostly we're about state consultation. So other agencies within the state, like the Environment Department for water quality, the Office of the State Engineer for water quantity, Game and Fish for threatened or endangered species, state forestry also for endangered plant species, and historic preservation division for archaeological considerations. This is the focus of what we really do. This is the Quest to Mine, and this is the Capuline reclamation that's ongoing there. And the goal of the Mining Act is really to put the mine back into some sort of self-sustaining ecosystem, is the way that the rule reads, and or post-mining land use. So we're never going to achieve restoration. It's reclamation, and there's a difference between the two. Restoration is you're going to restore it to its original condition as close as you can, like you restore a car. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about reclamation, which is returning the landform to some functional use, like grazing or wildlife habitat. We have different levels of permitting. I won't go into detail too much, but we have small scale gold operations, for example, which prospecting is exempt under ours. And if you're moving small amounts of material through dredging or dry washing, these are typical sort of one step up from recreational hobby miners. Basically, you need a $50 permit from us. It's like a fishing license almost. Then you can graduate into a bigger permit. We call these minimal impact exploration or a regular exploration. Minimal impact, I'm not real fond of that term. I think the public misinterprets that a lot, but it's, I'd rather it just be something generic, like a type 1 permit or something, but this is what it is. 5 acres or less of disturbance. A regular exploration is a bigger scale, up to over 5 acres, up to an unlimited acreage. And these take into account, like I said, our cooperation with state agencies for ARC sites or endangered plants and surface water or groundwater impacts. Then you graduate up into a mining permit. There's a minimal impact mining permit, which is less than 10 acres of disturbance, and up to 40 acres for certain commodities that are deemed to be rather non-deleterious, like humate or perlite. And then regular mining is anything over 10 acres of disturbance. And these have a higher level of scrutiny when it comes to the different environmental factors I talked about before. This is just a part of the state regulatory framework. I've highlighted or underlined in bold the program that I'm working for, but as you can see, there's numerous other state laws. New Mexico Clean Water Act, which is regulated by Groundwater Quality Bureau, Surface Water Quality Bureau, and Hazardous Waste Bureau. Water rights are a big factor in New Mexico, and that's administered by the Office of the State Engineer. Air quality permitting for both equipment use and processing, and then historic preservation through the Office of Cultural Affairs. This is a basic outline of what it would take to get a new mine permitted in the state of New Mexico. We call this a Part 6 new mining operation. The first step is a work plan, a sampling and analysis plan, where you're essentially delineating and documenting the baseline condition pre-mining, the pre-mining condition. And that baseline data report. Well, you give us the work plan, then you go out and collect the data, and it's a minimum of a year. A lot of these, like groundwater sampling, we want at least a year's worth of data. Same for wildlife and vegetation studies. And then the operator would need to put together a mining operation and reclamation plan. The operation side is just to get to what you're going to build and how you're going to reclaim it. And that's the part that the Mining Act is most interested in, but you have to have a good plan to know what you're going to do so that you can tell us how you're going to reclaim it at the end. And then the wrap up is basically an environmental evaluation, which is a NEPA-like process. NEPA is a federal law, and we're talking about state law right now that I'm administering, state law. But it's a NEPA-like document. And then, of course, there will always be public hearings along the way. And then if you're on a mine site that has a federal component, either BLM or Forest Service, which is most common here in New Mexico, you might fall under one of these or maybe all of these. General Mining Law of 1872, as Ginger said, is the base process by which you file a claim to that mineral. And that doesn't give you a right to mine it. It just gives you a right of ownership. You still need to get permits on top of that. And then there's the 3809 surface management regulations that the BLM would have. And then the Forest Service has a different set of regulations. But it all comes down eventually on the federal side to the National Environmental Policy Act, the NEPA, and then endangered species, EPA permits like for stormwater pollution prevention, dredging permits under 404, and then explosives and transportation. The BLM and the Forest Service, this isn't my realm necessarily, but we interact and they're often cooperating partners for mining. So I just thought I would touch briefly on the federal laws that go along with the state Mining Act. It's similar. They have certain exemptions. They have a notice of intent level for exploration or mining, and their bigger mining or exploration operations require what they would call a plan of operations. We have tried to reduce duplication, and we coordinate often with our federal partners. We try to have an annual meeting with them. We have one coming up here in January. We have a lot of new employees in my group, a lot of new employees at the BLM and at the Forest Service. So we're trying to eliminate some of that duplication where possible. And then under the NEPA evaluation, there are categories. There's a categorical exclusion, which is a low level of analysis. And then you, depending on the potential impacts, you can get up to an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. And just to point out, this is an older 2018 diagram here, but from notice of intent to record of decision on the federal side is an average of 4 years and 6 months. That's just for the environmental analysis to help guide the operation and then the reclamation at the conclusion of mining. And that concludes my talk. I'm happy to take questions now or later. Use advance, and I think that's the laser.
Thank you. I'm Bob Newcomer. Have a long history with trying to get mines permitted in New Mexico. I was just thinking my first efforts were in the late 1980s with a gold mine in Santa Fe County. And that's when I realized that this wasn't going to be easy. I like polished sections. The wonder what the image is. That's a polished ore section from a copper mine, and it really symbolizes the challenges. That's chalcocite, which is a copper-rich mineral, which is the ore mineral in the deposit, and it encapsulates mineral pyrite, which is an iron sulfide mineral, and it is waste material. The problem is it has to be managed because it can react with oxygen and water and create acid mine drainage. So that was just an interesting fallout of a pretty picture that I stuck on there. I realized it was symbolic of the challenges. We've addressed much of this through this discussion. This is pretty much like any other effort. I'm giving you somewhat from the mining industry side because they're my customers. If you're going to advance a project, you must involve multiple stakeholders. And this isn't a new thing. In the late 1980s, there was efforts to engage and incorporate input from entities, and that was before the Mining Act, which came out in the early 1990s. And then the other thing from the industry side, this is a very capital intensive business. And so they've got a benefit, but more and more, as DJ laid out in his permitting process, we have to address concerns of local communities and eventually the ecosystem. We got to try to reinstate the ecosystem at the end of mine life. This is a list that came out of a Ernst & Young this year, fairly new, a list of priorities of what the risks were to industry. And it's interesting, the first one is capital. I'm only going to talk and hit the high ones. I'm not going to go through the whole list. But capital has moved up from 8th to number 1. So mines are concerned about the capital to advance mining projects. And I compared this to the previous year's list. And the other interesting things is environmental stewardship, which encompasses things, has fallen to number 2, still way up there, but it's money is becoming a much bigger issue with the demands of moving forward in this environment. The fourth one is new to the list this year, and it's, as Ginger was discussing, the resource and reserve depletion. We are running out of known resources, and this is a global perspective. This list isn't just for New Mexico. So it's risen to number 4 on the list. So it illustrates the importance of finding and developing new resources. And the other one that's new to the list is the other one highlighted in yellow, and that's new projects. There's not many new projects in the queue right now. And we need more. I heard anecdotally that we could use a new copper mine every year for the next 20 years to meet projected copper demand. And it just, at this pace, we're not even close. And innovation is 10th. It's come down a little bit, but still on the list. The last one, you can't see it. It's cut off there. That's workforce, and it dropped from 10th to 11th on the list. This I'm going to just give you a real rough. It's a very complex outline of an arduous and risky journey for miners, very capital intensive. They're basically spending money up front with, they don't realize their return on their investment until they're actually producing metal. So heavy investment in capital, risk assessment all along the way, with the potential that they could stop at any time if the project is deemed infeasible, and permitting and the opportunity to make a mine is evaluated at every step. Starts with exploration and discovery. In New Mexico, most of the resources are what are considered brownfield resources. They're in known mining districts that have been looked at historically, and we have very few greenfield, which is where you find and discover a deposit in an unknown area. I bolded, and I won't, DJ address the importance of the federal nexus in permitting, and you probably hear in the news that can slow things down considerably. There's mines that have been not in New Mexico, but that have been in the process for decades. And then, but the highlighter or bolded items are the ones that require permitting in the process. So we have to obtain permitting to do any drilling, sampling, and analysis. And that's usually a sequential process. So you drill, evaluate, and raise capital again, drill, evaluate. And through that process, you go from a resource to a reserve. And a reserve is a higher level of confidence that you have an ore deposit, something that can be mined. Then it works down through additional evaluations to feasibility of mining and mineral processing. So all this has to work out to where you can demonstrate to your investors that you can actually mine and produce the metal at a profit. And I have listed, if feasible, the detailed mine. Most projects, you start the process of mine permitting earlier, even before the project is deemed feasible. And that process involves developing a detailed mine plan as well as a closure plan, again, as DJ alluded. And then you have to, before you can actually execute and move forward with your permit, you have to put up financial assurance. And that can be at levels of hundreds of millions, depending on the size and scale of your mining operation. That is essentially monies in the form of a bond that the state holds in the event of a forfeiture. The miner was to abandon things and leave them, and the state had to hire a third-party contractor to close the mine in accordance with the mine plan. Then if everything's gone well and you're there, you get your permit and then you build the mine. So this is a little hard to read, but the bottom line is this is a global. Right now, the average, this just came out, S&P Global Market Intelligence. They estimate 16 years at a global level to permit and build a mine. And you can see the lower part shows you how that's changed since 2005, when it was about 12 years to the present. And also notice that mining companies can build mines about the same rate once they have their permit as they could back in 2005. So it's the process of permitting and evaluation that takes a long time now. So key challenges. Raising necessary capital, the people I deal with every day. I sometimes worry about getting my own bills paid. So a lot of them are hand to mouth, especially the smaller companies. Addressing the ESG, that's the acronym for environmental, social, and governance issues that we've talked about here. Finding new deposits. A lot of the large, close to the surface deposits are being depleted and mined out. So we have to get creative. We have to look for larger deposits. A lot of mining companies are going deeper and deeper. There's a mine in Arizona, you may have heard about the Resolution copper mine near Phoenix. They will be mining a porphyry copper system that will produce 25% of the copper needed in the US. When it's operational, but they're mining from a depth of 7,000 feet, so over a mile. And so finding and developing trained qualified workers. One of the big things is we really haven't mined underground at that scale for a long time. So that's just one of the challenges. We need lots of smart people, and we need to start training a workforce in anticipation. And then, as Ginger alluded, anything we can do to capture additional value from mine waste. And then if we can't, we need to find creative ways to manage those wastes to prevent impacts to the environment and facilitate their closure in a more cost-efficient way. Sustainability concepts. These are questions really for industry. The first one, can we address impacts from legacy mine waste as a condition of social license? This isn't required in the regulations or anything, but we're finding, for example, in the uranium mining industry, we're seeing the handwriting on the wall that we have to address mine waste as a condition of social license if we want to permit new mines in New Mexico. Can we operate successfully within, a reduced carbon footprint? I talked about that today. A lot of the large mining companies are moving to electrified haul trucks and so forth to try to reduce their carbon emissions. And can a mine operate in New Mexico with reduced impact on water resources? Mining and milling is a high water use industry. The last one, can we incorporate more creative ways and sustainable ways of looking at post-mining land uses? The regulations are pretty clear on what we have to do from a regulatory standpoint, but we may need to move beyond that and consider post-mining uses of the land that add additional value to local communities. So last, raise public awareness. These are the things that we've been talking about: education, communication, involvement, all the things that this consortium has been focused on. Take advantage of new technologies, in situ leach, and those are ongoing. There are some new technologies in the copper mining industry. They're going to allow waste materials to be leached, and copper that was too low a grade to go to the mill will now be recovered, and streamlined administrative and permitting process to advance projects.